Hey, welcome back. This is Steve T with SOFtact Solutions. Welcome back to another version or another edition of Tech Talk Team Room. I've got with me again, Sergeant Major retired Mike Adcox, currently with NTT Data as the senior client executive. Likewise, back with us is CSM retired Jack Nichols, who's the director of network and cyber integrations for NTT Data. And had a lot of great responses, a lot of great feedback from our last podcast. I appreciate you guys taking the time to follow up with us again. I do know that we had spoken. We really wanted to do this follow-up, right at that holiday season, right, where things are really tough with folks either transitioning, moving. It's a lonely time for most. And we really wanted to get together and help out as best we can and share some information. Unfortunately, right, timelines didn't match up, and so here we are in wonderful Washington D.C. And in the spring. So went through hopefully you guys had a great holiday season. I know things are picking up now business wise, and so again appreciate you guys making the time to come out here and meet us in D.C. to do this. Looking at some of the things that we had talked on before, obviously we received a whole lot of feedback on the positive side with regards to the information you guys were putting out, the sincerity in which you were putting it out, right? And I think it resonated with a lot of folks, far removed from the military years ago and folks that are in transition today. And I think it worked out really well. For those who are new watching out there or new to the channel, Tech Talk Team Room, right? The premise behind that is to have conversations that you don't normally have in conferences or other business engagements, and you're not able to have, let's just say, unscripted, raw conversations. In some cases, maybe a little bit controversial, right? We don't all agree on everything, and that's okay. And those are the kinds of conversations we want to have. This is unscripted. We have topics we want to kind of put out there and then let the guys go. And that's what we did on the last one, and it worked out extremely well. And so, again, from our side in SOFtact Solutions, a lot of positive feedback. But want to hear from you, Mike, on what did you hear? Did it make sense? Did it help anyone? Where do you see things?
Yeah, first off, I'd like to thank you and SOFtact for having Jack and I back. Bringing back the old sergeant majors back, two criminals to come talk to you again. I will tell you, I was pleasantly surprised on how many folks reached out, events that we attended or I attended that literally came up and talked about, seeing that the first podcast and, even some of the example, the water bottle example and some other stuff, and like, hey, that really resonated. It even went outside of some of the guys that we know, from our past days in the work side. I was really surprised that there were people at my wife's work that actually saw the podcast that actually talked about how it affected their husbands and how they actually watched the podcast.
Really?
Which I was really surprised at hearing that it had resonated that far out from our circle, which was surprising. And again, it was it's a pleasant surprise. But I'll tell you, Steve, I can't thank you guys and SOFtact team enough for having Jack and I back, and the folks out there listening to us old sergeant majors rap about things and what's past and coming for future. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And good to hear that. Let's just say that we're reaching out beyond the parameters of the community that we grew up in and know so many folks. And Jack, what was feedback on your side? I mean, obviously your aperture is a little bit different than Mike and I, right? So what were you getting?
Well, it's once again, thanks for this opportunity. I had a great time last time, and I think that what I found was that a lot of those that listened to the last podcast enjoyed it as well, just based on the humor, the team, right? As you described, it's like the team room type thing. It resonated with friends that aren't in SOF community because it was similar. We all experienced the same, changes, the challenges, and I'm currently going through that again. My wife is retiring, this week.
Yeah. Okay. Congratulations, Carlene.
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 Yeah.
So, it kind of resonates with her, but we're different personalities. And that was kind of one of the things that, people that listened to this that weren't in our spaces totally understood, and they picked up upon that. And they're like, that was good hearing from you guys speak that way. Because I think a lot of them, they recognize that, it's inevitable, as Mike described, that it's going to fall. You're going to fall, that water bottle, scenario. And I heard a lot about that, right? Because, people called me, asked me the questions. Hey, man, what did you experience? How did it feel? And I told them, I said, I felt a little bit lonely. And it goes back to the podcast, right? What we described. I feel that way too. And I said, it's all right. It all gets better. And I realized that, to your point, 1 year later, last week was 1 year with NTT. It's okay. Life is good. And I've adapted to the change. And again, it's that hump. As Mike says, the fall, but there's going to be also that hump now that you got to kind of get over. And I think I've achieved that at this point. So, I appreciate you allowing us to come back to follow up on our conversation from last time.
Yeah, no, hey, yeah. And again, congratulations to Carlene. Congratulations, Jack, 1 year at NTT Data. That's good stuff. Hey, you said something, right? And it kind of brings up a question. I'd offer that question to both. And so you look at, hey, a year ago, it was post TechNet Augusta. And I was pretty optimistic of things that we were hearing, from the TechNet Augusta pieces and parts, right? I think you and I kind of disagreed on some of those, and it looks like you were right. And so I need to put that plug in, right? Mike was right. Damn it. But let's talk a little bit about relevance, right? As you're a year out, from the time you left, and we talked a year ago post TechNet Augusta. There are a lot of transformations. There are a lot of developments and evolutions in the technical industry in 1 year's time. And while you were off ramping and in that transition, as Mike had put it, and so eloquently, right, in all these challenges you have, there was a sense of relevance from a technological standpoint or operational standpoint that maybe made sense, right? A year later, is that still the case for folks that are getting ready to transition? Is technology and the evolution of the landscape with regards to AI or quantum or any of the other disciplines that are now being faced by the industry and the government at large, is there a relevance challenge for those guys? I mean, do they have to know more? Are they less prepared than we were coming out? When I came out, I didn't necessarily have, I needed to learn contractual pieces and parts, understand the capture and the BD worlds, and things that we didn't normally do as a green suitor. But from a technological standpoint, pretty sound. I would say. Today, is that the case? I don't know.
I would think, to use an analogy, it's like a tree, right? And when we come out of the military, you're at the trunk level. And what you have to decide is whether you're going to be managerial or technical.
Okay.
You can't be both, right? You can't run that tree both. You can't take the trunk all the way to the top. It's not possible because it branches off some shape, form, or fashion. So I think by deciding in some shape, form, or fashion whether you're in or whether you've transitioned out, and maybe, take Jack, for instance, where he's at right now, right? Jack's still on that trunk, and sooner or later, from a career perspective, right? And I'll be back to your point in a second, but what you have to make that decision first. And when you make that decision, whether it's managerial or whether it's technical, you're going to have to see whether or not that you have adapted your technical acumen or your managerial acumen or both to be able to go that branch and broaden your career horizons. It's very hard to know if I'm still in a green suit, which part of the branch. Now, some of them, right? Some of the guys, that we know that were 100-pound heads that were, could count ones and zeros in their sleep. You knew kind of which branch they were going. Guys like us, a lot of times in our career paths, it seems that I have the technical acumen just enough to be able to tell you capabilities. But if you're relying on me to be your ones and zero guy, some stuff's going to blow up. Right? I'm not your guy. Blue smoke's coming out. But from a managerial or from a programmatic standpoint, right, I am very versed in that. I am very good at that because at the end of my career, that's exactly what I was asked to do. We were all three of us were asked to do things in that nature. So back to your original question, Steve, is that theoretically, I will tell you that I think that we're right now, we're kind of in a technological tailspin, right? And what I mean by that is that everybody is screaming AI. Everybody is screaming some type of different technology that has to get to the tactical edge quicker, faster, lighter, you name it. The problem with, in the way I see it's a tailspin, is there's a lot of asking, but there ain't a lot of planning and doing yet, right? And that is becoming problematic. There are people trying to plan, but I see the disconnect is that the true requirement seems like the goalpost moves. It seems like the goalpost moves to, you tell me AI, what does that mean? Because AI to you, AI to him, and AI to me could be 3 different AIs, man. It could be 3 different applications and actual implementations. Same thing with multiple other technologies today. And I think as the guys are on the inside in the green suits, you're watching that, you're being asked to do that, you're being asked to look for the future. The general officer levels are trying to plan for how that is going to prepare them for the futuristic battlefields, because they're going to retire someday, leave a technological legacy in some shape, form, or fashion that somebody's going to have to pick up and move forward with. Us on the industry side are doing our best to try to help them get to those answers and what it looks like. But it seems like there's a lot of whirlwind on really what that actual picture is.
You know, I appreciate that. I think that's kind of where the question was going, right? Where, again, a year ago, there were already inherent challenges with regards to transition, whether that be, identity crisis, whether that be, financially, right? Who's going to pay me? How do I pay my bills? The transition alone from something you've known, 30 plus years in an institution, and now leaving that institution where you're the guy that doesn't know anything. All of those things, what was never mentioned? There was never mentioned by any of us in there, right, or Jack at the time that you were transitioning out. Hey, I don't think I'm smart enough from a technical standpoint. Right? I don't think anything in my career that I've done to this point has equipped me with dealing with the technical evolutions that we're seeing today. I don't know. I'm asking. That's why I asked the question. But if it were me, if I put myself in those shoes, and I'm getting ready to transition out, understanding that the landscape has changed so dramatically, I'd have whether I was pursuing a managerial route or a technical route. We didn't grow up with this technology. You know what I mean? And so quite frankly, we are not subject matter experts at either implementing, sustaining, or overseeing any of these technologies. And so that would have been, at least for me, an added pressure, right? Going out into the industry, out of an institution that we've been a part of for our entire adult lives, into a complex landscape that people are just trying to keep up with. Not understand or know, but they're struggling to keep up with the advancements and it's ubiquitous, right? It's everywhere you look. What do you think, Jack? I mean, do you think that would be an added challenge? I think it would for me.
I think it is. I think it's a transformational leadership out there, though, right? So again, it goes back to what you're describing. When we all came in, we were running single channel systems, and it migrated. But you had to learn. You had to learn what's SHF systems. You had to learn about automations. There was no computers per se, or networked computers when I first came in the Army, So, dating myself, but then I think us at the table, we didn't have that either. There wasn't Cat 5 tied into our things, but you learned how to make these things. You learned, and again, so I look at it from the perspective of, we had training manuals back in the day. You had your, you can pull those things, your regulations, you would have stacks of books on your desk, right? If you read them, I don't know, but, you had stacks of books on your desk. What I see now, and kind of goes back to what Mike's describing, if you look at it, AI, everybody says AI, and it's one thing, so it's something else, But what I look at it is that we use that quite a bit, right? We can ask it the questions, as you said, the 100-pound heads earlier. In some sense, you can be the 100-pound head, but you're just kind of wave top. Mm-hmm. You can get an answer really easy by asking the AI to kind of present you a solution to a problem. And I think that that's kind of what we're seeing now, too, is like, I can ask the AI, what's next? and it can kind of give me this thing, but is it good information? I don't know. When I used to take the word of a person that I thought was smart, I was like, all right, that means a lot, versus I'm looking at this thing that just pops up on my phone or my computer. Is it relevant? Is it real? Is it right? I don't know. I'm rolling with it, right? But back in the day, if I asked Mike about the SHF systems, look at we talked about this, the feed horn. He's like, well, that feed horn looks like it's wrong.
Man,
there's
that
something
picture
wrong with that.
always comes up some way or another. It pops
John,
up, man.
Man, that is the blackest mark on John Sullivan that I could ever put on that little fella. Let me tell you what, man. I was a victim of circumstance, man.
But you're looking at it because he knew it was wrong. And like, again, it goes back to AI gives you that too. It's like, this isn't right. Doesn't look right. There's something wrong about it. So there's all these things that, what's real and what's not. And I think that that's kind of what I see with the technological advances is that, how do we continue to morph these things when you're kind of, sometimes I would say, a mile wide and an inch deep, in some of the technology. Again, I owe it to my battle buddy sitting at this table to learn more because I knew Steve knew that. I knew Mike knew that. Right now, I don't know if that's, because again, I
think
go
the soldiers are going to be pushed. They're going to be pushed to have to learn it. They're going to be pushed. Just like when we were in, we were pushed to learn new technology, and we were pushing everybody else to catch up with us to interface with the technologies in the end of our career that we had learned from. Right? Yeah. We would go to other places and go, what do you mean you guys don't have 117 Fox radios? What are you talking about?
How can you not do data over
How can you
radio?
not do data? How do you guys even communicate? What are you using, rotary phones over here? What are we doing?
It's I appreciate Jack, because that brings up a couple of things, and we covered it in the last podcast, and certainly wanted to follow up with it again on this one. Again, it's the challenges of transition, and I believe that in at least our industry and our world, and I'd imagine, other MOSs or other NECs out there and things of that nature have, similar challenges. I believe each and every year it becomes more challenging. I believe there's yet another brick, right, that's laid on the shoulders of the folks that are coming out, right. And I think that's just evolution in itself. But self-worth, right? So if you're that individual out there on that final 18-month stretch, right, in preparation, where am I going to work? Where am I going to live? What am I going to do? How am I going to get paid? This new world of name the technology is so complex. Am I ready? Right? Have I taken the time to educate myself? Have I taken the time? What does that resume look like? Right? Because you've mentioned that on a number of discussions that we had, right? And so how do you promote your self-worth, which is not a trait, right, that at least in the communities we grew up in, right, you didn't pound your own chest, right? Humility was a big piece and part of that, right? You advocated for, your buddies, those on the left and right, and you made sure that everybody knew how the great things that the heroes are doing. You never, right, wanted to be in that spotlight. According to what we discussed last time and some of the discussions we've had now, you have to do that.
You have to. I mean, I look at tens of thousands of resumes over a year. I really do. I mean, I look at literally tens of thousands of resumes. And I will tell you exactly what you're talking about is defining the self-worth for somebody preparing themselves to transition is one of the very first things you have to define. But you have to do that in a way. You can't go to MSN Money and say, okay, I should be getting paid this much because I have this skill set. And next thing you know, I'm in an interview with a resume that's probably not directed exactly to the job that I'm applying for, and I'm going to ask for $160,000, okay, as an arbitrary number. Well, the median for that position, the area that you're going to be working in, it doesn't equate to that. The market does not equate to that. So you haven't done you may have done some self-worth a little bit, you scratched it, but it's a bigger picture. It's a much broader picture. And you have to be able to definitively look at your skill sets, look at your experience levels, look at the actual nature of work that you're wanting to do in the area that you want to do that in. And then you have to utilize the resources of people that are actually in those areas that are doing that to get you a point of reference. Another analogy, it's like buying a house. It's called comps, right? You're not going to put your house up in a neighborhood that's $100,000 neighborhood, ghetto fabulous, and I'm going to say, well, I need extra money, so I'm going to put mine in there for $300,000. It's never going to sell, just like you are never going to sell if you outprice yourself out of the market in the area that you're in. Defining your self-worth is absolutely critical as you transition out, and that's talking to people that have made the transition. It's actually doing your homework on the skill sets that are required for you. Do you need a PNP? Do I need a CISSP? Do I need a degree? Okay, if you say yes to all those, how much are those worth in a salary negotiation? Do you know? Do you know how much those are worth? How much is a clearance worth today? So when I go and have those negotiations, I need that negotiating power to be able to talk to those hiring managers because they know. They absolutely know. Do you know what the range for the median is? Do you know for that job what the high and the low is and where you should be in there? Because if Steve was interviewing for me and he was interviewing for a high level position, right, from a managerial perspective within our company structure, right, he should be selling himself at the top of that range with his experience, his knowledge. And if you're not, you get one chance to make a first impression in the industry. And if you sell yourself low, it takes years for you to get to where you actually should be compensated. Years. And if you sell yourself too low, you never get there to your true worth. So you get one chance to do that, and it just makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of resources for the guys that we know. That's a phone call away. Call me. Call Jack. Call you. Hey, man, I'm thinking about going to be a network engineer. I'm going out. I'm getting out, man. That's what I want to do. Okay, where are you living at? I'm going to live in Oregon.
Right.
Okay, first off, why are you moving to Oregon? That's a whole nother beer conversation. All right, you're going to Oregon. Okay, you're going to be a network engineer in Oregon. West Coast is more expensive. Okay, have you considered that? Have you considered all this, and this? If you have, then you're probably somewhere where you need to be on that discussion.
But I think what you're describing, Mike, is realistic expectations too, right? So
Sure.
that kind of aligns to all those things where I found where like the last year I'm working, I'm working on all these things that I never really did in the past, right? Now, I'm working to the CISSP. I'm getting all these things, And so again, it's like, if it's that important, if it was always that important, then we would kind of done it, right? It kind of goes back to describing kind of what you're talking about, this branch or this branch, It's, the Marines do it pretty well. They pick and choose which direction they're going to go, right? It's going to be a CSM or you're going to be, a Sergeant Major.
Right.
But, with us, it was as I saw it, it was having the conversations with friends, because, as I use TechNet as the example and several other locations, walking around the floor. Because I don't know what that person does. I don't know what this is, and it was kind of and I think I may have mentioned the last time, what is a BD? What's that all mean? What is that? I don't, again, it's,
Who is this BD?
right. What is this, who's this person we speak of? Who is he?
Tell me who BD is.
Right. So these kind of things were like, because you don't have that position in the service. So then again, what does it mean? What is the expectation of me? And I've had this conversation with Mike. Matter of fact, I said, all right, so what's the expectation? And again, it goes back to sometimes you just have to have somebody explain it to you because coming out on this side, exactly what Mike said. You probably should be reaching out to people to just have the question. And we saw it when we sat down with a bunch of sergeants majors. It goes back to also what's your worth. LinkedIn, we are all on that. But your LinkedIn account kind of says that you do all these spectacular things.
You mean the new Facebook? Yeah.
Well, but then
The business Facebook.
the business Facebook, is that what that is?
But the thing is like how you word what you do, right? You could be the driver, but it says, you could have your driver's badge, but the way it's, you describe being a driver is that you're a chauffeur and everything else. I mean, it's, it's pretty, like I say, what I see is out there when I read them, same thing as Mike says, if I read a resume, it kind of says that you do all these things, but do you,
Well, let's pull the thread on some of what you both are saying at the same time. First, when you start talking about feedback and folks reaching out from the last podcast now, obviously we don't want to, everything we're talking now is absolutely in preparation for what do you do next and how do you support your family, and providing them with the level of comfort and security that they've had for all these years, right? Obviously you want to go above and beyond that and be more successful, right? Because nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to suck that day. But And so we want to keep talking about that, and probably need to delve in a little bit more on the how. We're talking a lot about the what and the why,
Right.
but 6 years ago when I was that guy, right? I mean, it was the how is pretty confusing, right? It's where do I start? And maybe that's a conversation, right? And that's what it was for me. I went and spoke to Flakes and a few other guys, and okay, there's my starting point. Here's the track. Here's what I don't want. Right, and here's what I am okay with, and that was financially and day-to-day operations and things of that nature. And so I think we need to pull on that a little bit more, on the how exactly. But we don't want to pull away from the emotional side of things, right? Because as you're learning and as you're talking and as you're trying to figure out where you need to be and how you need to get there, that emotional strain, right, impacts everyone and everything. And so how do you juggle all those things without dropping a ball, and being the person you need to be? Because certainly by the time it's at its end and you get hired on somewhere, are you able to push the relief valve and now you're good and ready to go? Or are you coming in just sour and just full of piss and vinegar and just angry at the world, right? Because that makes a difference.
I mean, you describe a good point. On the last podcast, we kind of talked about getting rid of some of the white noise to allow you to make those, to get to the how, right? And like you just stated, is that a good place to start is I know what I don't want to do, right? That's a great place to get to. That's a great first step to get to the how, because the more you can narrow down the things that you don't want to do, and that you could absolutely write in ink the things that you do want to do, right? That white noise level floor, that floor starts to get pretty low. And it makes that, how do I get to it to make those decision points, easier. It makes it easier. If you're trying to boil the ocean on that decision of how, it gets so stressful, and exactly like you described, how everybody deals with stress differently, right? Is the family getting beat down because of that? Because I'm stressed out because I know I'm transitioning. I need a job, and I need to make this much money. I have to make this. I got kids going to college in 5 years. I got this coming. I got my brand new truck out there. I need this. It's got dualies. It's got all kinds of stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you got to have a dually.
He needs a step ladder to get in it, but he's got a nice truck. But I mean, that you look at those types of things. And
do you have anything to pull?
No.
Okay.
Myself.
It's got an anti-dirt magnet on it because you won't allow dirt on it, right? Won't even fit in the garage.
It's a good thing that diesel's so cheap these days. Okay, perfect timing.
Right.
Perfect timing.
But getting to that how, again, Steve, is getting rid of the distractions, bringing that white noise floor down to truly deciding what is the most important for you, like work-life balance. When we were in, man, work-life balance was laughable. It was laughable, man, because in the grand scheme of things, at least for me, it was always mission. Mission and the fellas, man. Mission and the fellas, right? Yeah, there was politics and there's all this other stuff but to me, it was mission and fellas. And when I transitioned out, that guy, Big Red, did not transition well into the workforce. I'm just telling you, man, I found out in a hurry that some of my expletives were not very well received on civilians, right? Just wasn't very well received, even though I felt they were terms of endearment. They didn't see it that way, right? So that transition, as you came back out, that's another thing too, is like you cannot be the same person. I think you mentioned that before. You can't be the same person that you were in that green suit when you put on that collared shirt. You can't be the same.
That reinventing yourself is, and I would offer again, I think we talked about it a year ago, man, 6 years after the fact, at least for me, right? You learn something new every day, something new every year. You try and, be better at the things you're doing, and the person that you are. And so there's that continuous, evolution of getting better. And so, in that process, of reinventing yourself and identifying your self-worth, that it's a continuous, it's a never-ending process, right? And that's what I found out here in the last, couple years. It's just never going to end, right? I mean, if you continue to want to be successful, at least in this industry, and you want to be relevant, whether you've been in this industry for 6 years, 10 years, 20 years, you have to continuously reinvent yourself
And evolve.
you have to evolve, and quite frankly, right, you have to be extremely flexible, which is not exactly one of my strong suits, right?
Well, that's a great point, because I look at the flexibility, because you have the flexibility to leave, right? So when you're assigned to some of these organizations, being in the military, you're there for a period of time. It is the thing. You're going to be there for 2 years, and you're going to like it. You're going to love it, and then you're going to PCS and go do something else, right? And you're going to like and love that too. Where industry, as I described, I've been here for a year, but I heard a lot of my peers talking about, like, they only did this for a couple months here. They worked at this company over there for a couple, few months, and it was a culture issue. It was, they just didn't like what they were doing. It was a family concern. So those things are out there too. There was there's a lot of change, and it's easy to make a change. Whereas the Army, you just kind of had to deal with it, right? Sometimes
You could quit.
What?
Fails UPT test, gain about 90 pounds. I mean, you could quit.
It's an option.
It's an option.
It's a
right?
long-term plan, though.
But you have the flexibility on this side, so it kind of goes back to what you're describing. If you don't like it, you can move on. But then again, it's finding the right organization, finding the right thing that you want to do, and kind of putting that out there. Like Mike says, put it all in order. These things matter to me. And if I can get that with the organization I'm with, then it's a win. And I think that's sometimes we miss that, because it goes back to what Mike once again described, the money. I want the money versus the...
If that's your only motivation,
then
you're
yeah.
dead man walking.
Yeah, well, you know what? And so we need to hit on that one pretty hard. That's actually, for those folks coming out, I mean, some of the advice that I've given some folks when they came, they knew in some cases what they didn't want. Mm-hmm. Right, but not in all cases, and so this is a topic. It's kind of it's a sensitive topic because I provide the same advice. Just because I give someone advice or because it's what I did doesn't mean it's right or wrong. Everybody has their own. Nobody knows what's really going on, in everyone's house, right? But I like to tell people, like, especially if you're coming out during that transition, you've got a number of options, right? If you've promoted yourself, you have the right contacts, and you know your self-worth, and so you're ahead of the game. If you want to be that person, right, that is focused on the money, then chances are at each conference every year you'll be wearing a different T-shirt, because it's, again, as we talked about, a never-ending evolution of re-identification and self-improvement. You're never going to have enough, right? You're always going to go to the next thing next, right, to make more money.
Right.
And so for me, it was a quality of life, right? I had to have a certain number because I had to live, yes? But the priorities for me in transition out is I need to be able to work with someone or people that I trust. People don't necessarily have to like them all, right? But I do need to trust them. I need to be able to wake up every day, know why I'm going to work, want to go to work, and work with the people around me, right? And have the ability, right, to have one-on-one conversations, make decisions, things of that nature. But I wanted that same community, or that same feeling of community, that same team room facility, if you will. And I'm, that was worth, name the amount of dollars, right, that maybe you make somewhere else, right? And so, I'm blessed for some reason or another, undeservingly, right? Great organization with great people, great leadership, and great pay. But my focus has always been, I want to go to work with people I know, I trust, and want to be with. And if you chase money, and we see them all the time at every conference, right? Oh yeah, I work with so-and-so now. Like, well, that's awesome. Okay. And so I think that's just one of those things that I think people find out the hard way. I think you just mentioned a little while ago, well, you'll just leave. Really? I don't know, man. I don't know that you want to just keep leaving. Well, I don't like this guy anymore, so I'm going to leave. Like, okay. From your perspective, right? So with all the hirings and stuff, I know what I've seen in the last 6 years, and Jack, you're probably seeing it now after a year out. When you get a resume and you see that the individual the longest time he spent with an organization is 30 months, what does that tell you?
It depends on what category they are, right? If they're overhead people, right?
Okay.
In other words, they're working for the company, right? The company's paying the salary, right? Or if they're contract people,
or the billable,
right?
Yep.
The billable, right? So that I put them in one of those two buckets initially. If they're on the contract side, right? the first thing that comes to my mind is your contract jumpers, right?
Okay.
You're a contract jumper, right? But I also, I try to look at the benefit of the doubt a little bit, right? Because some folks will get into contracts that may end up having a shelf life time frame
Right.
to get a project done. Okay, that's done, man. I mean, you ran your course on it. We don't have anything else for you. So they have to jump to something else. On the overhead side, that's a different ballgame for me, right? If I'm seeing multiple, right, and you're a back office person or you're an overhead employee and you have went to multiple companies, to me that would be problematic, right? I would definitely want to know the why you had to make those decisions. I'm not saying that you're not the right person for me, but that would be a red flag for me of wanting to know why you're jumping so many jobs in such a short amount of time. Now, I also look at the level of responsibility on both sides of that fence as well, right? If somebody's jumping this way, that's not necessarily a negative.
No.
But if they're jumping this way, right? If they're just lateral or they drop down to do something, then I need to know. I need to know why would you do that, right?
So that's probably not a topic that we hit on last time, right? Which, the initial concept was, here's how you prepare yourself for coming out. Here are the challenges. Mm-hmm. Emotionally, technically, this is what to look for. And this is why. Today, I think we're saying, okay, this is probably how you need to look at it, right? One of the things that we probably didn't have time to hit on is, what do you do once you're there, right? And so there's still planning, right? If you know what you don't want and you're able to get in the door with the things you do want with the right folks, what's next? Right? What do you want to be when you grow up?
Well,
right?
I caught the dump truck. Now what?
Well, but I think what Mike's kind of highlighting there is like the flexibility of the organization you're with, right? That they're looking for the same thing, and like they're giving you the ability to help in kind of looking beyond kind of where they're at, right? And that's kind of what I see is like, right, then he's bringing these initiatives, these ideas, these thoughts, that's huge, right? So again, that's what I kind of identified in my year, because I'm still kind of new to all this, but he's got a good point there. That's a pretty good idea. We never thought of it that way. And even if it's just application of certain things, like why we aren't doing this, why aren't we having like a staff call? You put together like things that you might have learned in the military that worked. Into a business function that maybe probably can get dressed up a little bit with that.
See,
right?
I don't think anything that we did in the military works in the businesses that we're in today.
Oh, I would disagree. You use it every day.
No, I'm not saying the decision-making processes, right?
You use every bit of it.
Like you just mentioned it, right? Like, why aren't we having staff calls? Because they were worthless? Let's be honest, right?
I would bet you with MA and Sam and yourself, you have some semblance of a staff call.
Oh, absolutely. Right?
That's
absolutely.
just
But it does, no.
Well, you're going to modify it.
So there's a difference between ops updates and staff calls, right? Like if I got to sit through another staff call, right? This award is in such and such. Well, it was there 6 weeks ago.
Yes.
There is nothing beneficial about that meeting because you're just telling me the same thing you told me last week and the week. But now ops updates entirely different.
But you're still having some semblance. Ops update, staff call. You're still having it because you'll be like, hey, all right, what's our vacancy report right now? Right? How many vacancies?
Yes, there's legitimacy in having meetings to provide the leadership. Regardless of the construct, with what is going on, right, from a contractual perspective, BD capture, things of that nature, right. So that they have a finger on the pulse with the business side of that. That's not what I'm arguing. But when we start talking in terminology and language and we start mentioning, like staff call, I'm tell you right now, man, as a CSM, I beg the command, like, don't make me go into this thing, right?
You didn't have flexibility there, but so back to the flexibility of things is that in staff call, it was tied to like the USR. You kind of had to make it a thing. So again, what I find here is
you're already getting him already.
but what I'm saying though is that you had a meeting that was productive if you brought the right information, and you had to rely upon certain leaders to give you that, right? But then again, it goes back to in this side of the house, I find that we can tailor it to what we need. It's just a discussion.
I would agree
right?
with
I
that.
just use staff call as an example, but it's a meeting.
I started twitching. Right?
Yeah,
When
I
you said
saw it.
staff call. I just, you know,
I
I just,
will, on the disagreeance part of that, I will tell you every single day, us three use MDMP.
oh, absolutely.
Every single day, right? And we use it to our advantage, to excel, to make decisions simpler, to mentor people, even our bosses that have never sat one day in the military, right? My CEO and my CEO have never been in the military, but if you watch some of the civilian sector try to do planning efforts, define requirements, figure out a way how to problem solve, me and you, us three, we look at it and go, I mean, this ain't rocket science, man. This ain't hard. Nobody's going to die. We're not going to lose an eye, right? We're good. And you see some of the civilians that literally, man, this is panic-stricken decision-making, right? I mean, there's hands wringing. What happens if we do this? The risk is this. We need to do a Gantt chart. I need a risk mitigation chart.
Yeah.
No, man, just get in the car and just drive over there and talk to the guy.
Just have a conversation.
Yeah,
And that's all it was. I mean, it was just
we
kind of
use
presenting
that.
your ideas.
That's those intangibles that the guys bring out of the military service, that they don't see that, and they don't write that down in resumes, right? They don't see it that way. That's just an everyday, because that's the crowd that they're around.
So another perfect point, right? And again, for those folks, you're at the cusp of transition. Those folks who've been out for maybe a year, you've had some problems finding where you want to go, finding, you know, the organization that you fit in best, or maybe it just hadn't met your financial needs. Again, obviously, struggles on the emotional side, the identity side, obviously impacting families. But as these guys are talking, right, I think, right, you just hit on something. What I have found on the technical side is if I see a resume that essentially shows, well, you know, the sun rises when this individual wakes up. When I get them in the room to have a conversation, they're absolutely terrible.
I call them used car sales.
Right. And so on the other side of things, you have resumes that are like, okay, well, let's bring them in. Let's have a discussion. And they are just knocking it out of the park. Like, well, hey, you did this for 10 years. Why didn't you put that on the resume? Well, I just didn't see if it was, you know, I didn't know if it was relevant. You know, yeah, exactly. Right. It was. And so, you know, when you talk on those things, the guys that we know and folks that we don't, those that have left the military, and again, right, let's not just focus on the CSM, SGMs, those first sergeants that have done 20 plus years in. It applies to those folks, right, coming out at lower enlisted or lower officer grades that are coming out after 6, 10, maybe 12 years. That decision-making process, the ability to look at things and containerize those with first things first.
Systematics.
Right? All of those things, right, are natural to them. So don't want to say that on the civilian side that they're not capable. They just think differently, right? Their brains don't have, they've not done that their entire adult life. They handle problems differently. Not saying it's bad, it's just different. Mm-hmm. And when you get those two into a room, there's going to be some disagreements on what to do next. But certainly when you go back to self-worth, when you go back to reinventing yourself, there are some things you want to keep and some things that are more worth, you know, certifications or otherwise. And so you want to have those conversations and at least convey that one way or the other. And that's kind of hard to do, though, right? How do you do that? How do you show someone you've never met before, I'm an awesome planner, I can make decisions like that?
Well, it goes along the same things that we do every day in our everyday life, right? Every single interaction that you have with somebody, if you have any interest in that individual, it's an interview. Mm-hmm. It's some shape, form, or fashion. It's an interview with that person. So if I am trying to sell myself, which is very difficult for transitioning military folks, they don't see it that way. It's bragging. A lot of them see it as bragging or boasting. It's not. You are if you look at it at the most macro level, you are a resource to that company. That's what you're trying to be. How do you sell yourself as the most equitable resource that they could possibly purchase? Because that's really what they're doing. Is they're ultimately paying you a salary to get a service out of a resource. Now that sounds kind of dark, cold, and twisty, but that's really what we are. We are all resources. We do jobs. We make them personal. We do them different ways. But when the rubber meets the road, when we all three pay bills and we look at the world that we live in at the business level, I look at Jack, I look at Steve, I look at Bill, I look at whoever. Those are resources that are attempting to accomplish a specific task that I'm getting paid for by a specific customer. And I want the best resource I can possibly get for within a reasonable amount of money, okay? To do that, you have to come in and tell me why you're my best resource. Why are you my best resource? Why should I choose you? And it's not bragging. It is because, hey, I've planned multiple battalion exercises. I was the architect for multiple battalion exercises. Okay, I'm a civilian. I don't know what the hell that means. What does that mean to me?
How big is that?
Yeah, what does that mean to me? Right? Okay, that's executive level decisions. There were 11,000 customers. So put it in your speak. I had 26,000 endpoints. I had this many computers. I had this many shots. I had this many this many that. That is not bragging. That's defining your ability to executively plan a network. Oh, nobody else came in here and told me they did that many of this, that many of this. That's impressive. That's, man, holy crap. All right, you did that. Congratulations. All right. You don't have a degree. Do I really need a degree? I'm already doing it. So is that degree required or desired? So if it's desired, I don't really need a degree to do your job, and I'm already telling you I can do your job. Not only can I do it, not just the middle, but I can do it at the top of your pay scale. So do I need a degree? Now, if it's required, that's a whole different animal, right? That's certifications and education. When they get into the required category, and I will tell you right now, is that the government has that completely twisted. Completely twisted. And here's a perfect example of that. I'm gonna stand on the stoop for a second. Every project manager across the government needs a P&P. Okay, you developed a standard. How many of the people that I work for as that contract P&P have a clue what the hell I'm talking about when I bring P&P terminology in that platform to all your staff? They don't have a clue what I'm talking about, so I got to break it down. Okay, so if I bring a Gantt chart in or I bring something in that's in the P&P side of the house, you have no idea what I'm discussing or how I'm talking or how I'm presenting it. Hey, can't you just put that on a slide? So why do I need a P&P to do that, right? Really, realistically, if you're not astute enough to be able to use the methodology as the customer, why are you requiring the contractor to have that certification to lead your services when you have no idea what he'd be talking about? It doesn't make any sense to me. So do you really need a guy with a P&P, or do you actually need a technical guy that's a leader that has experience? So do you really need a P&P? I would say no. And that stuff's starting to change. If you look at the government and the administration right now, you're starting to see those things change. Cybersecurity fields, you don't need a bachelor's degree,
Don't need it.
right? You need experience and certifications in the field that you're trying to work in. Wow. Hey, well, welcome to today on hiring cybersecurity experts, right? Now, some of those guys, hey, man, they're in the basement on the beanbag eating Cheetos. They don't have degrees. That's okay. I don't need you to do anything but ones and zeros, little fella. That's all I need you to do is keep me safe.
Got the certs.
You know, some of them, doctorate degree in cybersecurity. What does that mean exactly? What is that exactly doing for me other than putting a PhD behind you? I'm not saying it's good, bad, or indifferent. All I'm telling you is I think there are certain levels that applies, right? If you're trying to be the cybersecurity expert at CISA, maybe that PhD is holding some weight. But if you are at, the division level on a contract, that I just need a really good cybersecurity expert to make sure I don't get in trouble and that we're doing stuff safely and we're not getting hacked, what does that PhD do for you?
Yeah, I think, no, it's good points, man. I appreciate it. This follow-on's it's there are ways to start your transition and there are ways not to. There are things that are absolutely, must do, right, to ensure that you are protected, your emotional health is sound, and that you're taking care of those who depend on you. And then there are those things that are nice to do, things that you okay to do. And now we follow up on that, because all the internal stuff that you go through, right? I mean, there's really no checklist to get through that stuff. You need to talk to your buddies. You need to reach out and understand that those vulnerabilities, right, are the same everyone else had. now we're at the stage where, no shit, we're talking about, okay, this is how you go get the job, right, that you want, you deserve, and that you've been prepping for. And so, I think that we can follow on. Future podcasts to come, right, with very specifics on this is how you package up who you are, right? We've talked before in the past, and you should have 4 or 5 different resumes, right,
Yes.
that apply to different areas and the reasons why. And so I believe that the how to do that is extremely important. And I think that we're hitting on something, right, that everybody out there who's going through this is trying to figure out, like, okay, all these guys, these old timers, these gray hairs, are talking about do this. Yeah, tell me how to do it, right? Do I go to the library and somebody tell me, is there a checklist? I mean, how do I do it, right? How do I get started? And what does it look like do I pay somebody to get this done for me? What are we doing? And I would offer that maybe even more critical for the folks that we're talking about today, because things have changed so quickly and dramatically. Like you just mentioned, cybersecurity. I mean, that's been around since you stood up CPB, right? Okay, that's almost 20 years ago, right? Okay, nothing has moved and is as transformative as the landscape of AI today. And so how are you now going to package up everything that you knew at one point in time to add in the things you need to know? How do you convince that person that you're the right guy or the right gal? And so I think we need to kind of pull on that a little bit, have those discussions, and another opportunity we can all get together, maybe bring some folks in. That might be another thing, to talk about some of their challenges that they're having, and maybe ask you guys very specific questions on, as a senior account exec, what are you looking for? Yeah. Right? Can I come work for you? Kind of thing. Jack out a year, right, and working all his pieces parts within the cyber networking branches, right? What are you looking for? I need to work for Jack. Right.
But I think to align kind of a little while ago, you asked about, like, what are they looking for from industry, in the sense of, the retired sergeant major like Mike, right? I look at him, they're going to reach up to him because, he's got it, right? I can talk to him. I watch with some younger persons. I'm the old guy now, so at 55 years old, they're asking me questions. What do you do? How do you do this? And I think that's kind of one of the things that, people will look up to you for that, from your military experience. How'd you guys do this? How'd you do that? And it doesn't really matter if you've only been in 5 years. You've got some experiences coming out of the service of ways to do things right. And sometimes, not necessarily the way to do things. So I do see that, and I watch it like with those that have retired in our business. And I was like, right, you could tell sometimes who's the retiree, who has some military experience, the way they present themselves, the way they're organized, the way they brief something. So there's a lot of things that are good about, when you're looking at those resumes, because it goes back to every one of us have sat in a board in the past. Not everybody gets to sit in boards throughout the military per se. For a job interview, you go to a promotion board, and then how do you present yourself? And it goes back to how do you articulate something, especially when you want it, right? And you used to watch some of those kids come in there, and they were really good at the board process. And you had other ones, you probably need to study a little bit more. But the same applies for a job interview. Are you ready for it? Right?
I think there's some relevance there, right? I think that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Look, man, I think there are so many other segues, because we, again, as we look at preparing to retire, what to look for, what not to do, what to do. Now we're talking about you've retired, you're at the end, and this is where you need to go. And I think there's just so many other topics of discussion with the years of experience you have, the things that you've uncovered in the last year, some of the things that I've seen, or others, right, that fall within those parameters of now you're in the industry, what do you do, right? And are you going to be that mentor for those folks behind you, right? Are you going out? Are you writing things down? Are you establishing another network on your own, right, so that you connect all these folks together and build an apparatus of straight up professionals from the military into the industry? And I think that there's a lot of knowledge that you have and a lot of experience that you have, I think would be beneficial to those folks. And certainly, Jack, right, with again, things that you're seeing. You know, obviously your optic's going to be different than Mike's. Is going to be different than mine. And so I think that matters. But so until next time for that one, right? But want to certainly thank you guys again. I love talking to you guys, right? I can sit here and talk to you guys all day long. We start telling old stories and, you know, things of that nature, and that's even better.
There we were.
But a big shout out to Joy Barr, you know, our marketing manager. Joy puts this stuff together. She runs everybody together and runs, you know, is making certain we're at the right place at the right time, and has done incredible work for us. And so thank you, Joy. Soft Week. You know, this year, you guys, NTT Data is going to be at Soft Week.
I'll be there. Yeah.
Jack probably. I maybe unfortunately have to be in Vegas.
Yeah.
Oh, unfortunately, yeah.
So it happens. Right?
It happens.
I'm sacrificing, man. I'm taking it for the team.
Well,
I'm a team player. Right?
Yeah. So hey, listen. You know, we'll be at Soft Week. Jack will be there. Booth 2115. Joy, is that correct? 2115. Come see us. I'm sure Jack will be around. Come hang out. You know,
Absolutely.
we'll have some good conversations. Jack, with you being at Soft Week, obviously, you know, there's probably some things you want to highlight. But I'll turn to you first, Mike, on the NTT Data front. Updates from the last year, things you guys are progressing in, things that people should be on the lookout for.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I will tell you, we have been, over the last year since we talked last, we've been very blessed. NTT Data, we were very successful over this past year. We won the U.S. Marshals Force contract, which
Nice.
was a very sizable contract for us. I will also tell you, too, that we are probably one of 3 companies in the world right now are on the cutting edge from an AI perspective on transmission with regards to AI and AI services and AI technology for the future. It is mind-blowing to see that in our innovation centers and how they're doing that. It's impressive to see that. I will tell you that things that we can already do today is scary to the point that we'll see if the government can catch up to accept it, which would be an interesting concept.
We're going to hold that one right there because that's a whole other segment, and I think it'll probably get us all in trouble, and quite a few disagreements. But okay, yeah.
But I want to thank SOFtact and you, Steve, for having us in being a true partner with NTT Data. I will tell you, if you've been in the industry for more than 10 minutes. There's some scavengers out there, you know what I mean? And they look you in the eye and tell you one thing, and then a year down the road, you're no longer partners. I will tell you that the relationship that we have is that kind of a Mikeism is it's not show friends, it's show business. But I tell you what, it's a great place to start with show friends first, people that you can trust and true trusted partners. And SOFtact is definitely one of those for NTT Data, and I appreciate it.
No, thank you. And again, the partnership has been awesome, and we're looking forward to much more. I know Jack is heavily enthralled in opportunities as a team together. Jack, on the network and cyber side, what are people going to come talk to you at Soft Week about?
I agree with Mike there. Kind of everything ditto, right? But the thing for us is like, it's the how do we align with the partnerships? It kind of goes back to huge organization. We're out there. We're looking for opportunities with anyone else. How do we team up? How do we look for certain opportunities? So again, it's in the soft world, trying to get a little bit more into that from the DOW side of the house. But it's the discussions, it's the handshakes, it's the opportunities to see those other organizations, because tons of our friends are on this, and they work for other organizations that hey, let's have a talk. Let's discuss a few things. But outside of that, I'll be down there with you. Bouncing around.
It'll be a good
Absolutely.
time in May, 3rd week of May. Joy, 3rd week of May, 2115. Come see us by the booth. Come see Jack.
Yeah.
A lot to say there. Hey, again, thank you to everybody. One of the things we owe, if you got comments, you have feedback. Hey, if you want to be on the podcast and challenge these smart guys, let us know. We'll get you on, whether it's in Augusta here in DC or otherwise. But come on out to Soft Week. Come see everybody. Looking forward to the feedback we get. And again, thank you guys for everything. Until next time.